Hey, everybody. It is Monday, June 9th. You're listening to the Mo News Podcast. I'm Moshe Nunu.
And I am Jill Wagner. This is the place where we bring you just the facts.
And we read all the news and read between the lines so you don't have to. And I should begin by saying that today marks our last day together for a couple weeks. I'm going to cherish today's podcast, Jill.
We're going to hang on to every minute. That's right, Moshe. I am going away for a couple of days for just a little bit of R&R. You, though, are going on a very cool 10-day trip to Japan.
Yes, taking, actually, Jill, our first trip away from the baby after, I guess we're almost going on 21 months here. So big trip for us. I'm very much looking forward to it. Been to Japan for work a couple times, including the last time, frankly, was Fukushima and the tsunami and earthquake back in 2011. So that was definitely not a vacation in Japan. So I am looking forward to finally enjoying the country for the first time as a tourist and not as a journalist, though, you know, I always sort of have my journalist hat. So look out for coverage over on the Mo News Premium Instagram page. So I will be solo tomorrow. And then given the overlap of our vacations, Wednesday will be a special interview episode. It's no daily episode on Wednesday in terms of daily news, but you will get content. And then Jill will be solo with some special guests starting on Thursday through next week.
And then the band is officially back together on Monday, the 23rd. But we got you covered. There will also be plenty of news over on the Instagram feed and the newsletter.
The coverage continues. The team has grown. And so I will do my best to unplug Jill. And what could happen over the next 2 weeks while I'm away?
Don't tempt fate, Moshe.
You know, as luck would have it, I imagine there might be something in my neck of the woods over there in East Asia over the next 2 weeks. And don't worry, I'll put my Mo News hat back on, literally, to go cover it if necessary.
Okay, well, let's get to some headlines here on the streets of Los Angeles. The National Guard now on the ground in LA after immigration raids sparked a weekend of protests and some violence. And it all comes as the Salvadoran migrant mistakenly deported to El Salvador was returned to the United States. Well, what is next for his case?
Yeah, that's the case of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, who the government said they couldn't bring back, but now they've brought back. But to face trial, we'll explain all of that.
A U.S. travel ban affecting citizens of 12 countries goes into effect today. We're going to have the latest on that. President Trump making his most extensive remarks yet on his breakup with Elon Musk. The scoop on why Trump was tiring of Musk. A landmark settlement says colleges can now pay student athletes, why sports experts say this is the biggest change in the history of college sports. In medical news, younger women are being diagnosed with breast cancer at higher rates than older women, why researchers are looking at links between the disease and common household items, and the sweet moment between French Open champion Coco Gauff and her parents, and what her parents are still doing for her that might surprise you.
Is she still on their insurance?
Probably, but we don't. But that's not what we're talking about. And Moshe is on this day in history.
Your clue today. You can't touch this. Jill with a slightly haphazard attempt to sing the song there.
If it's not the song, I have no idea what you could be referring to.
I don't feel like you brought the full gusto to it, but that's okay. It's okay. It's Monday morning.
Mama. I mean, what are you looking for? All right, the Trump administration sent in 2,000 National Guard troops into Los Angeles Sunday after 2 days of confrontations between protesters and law enforcement. It came as U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, stepped up raids of local businesses across L.A. in recent days, including in heavily Latino areas. Protests first broke out in the Los Angeles area Friday and then Saturday, as federal agents mounted raids on at least 7 sites in search of undocumented immigrants. That included a Home Depot parking lot where day laborers often gather, as well as a facility in the Fashion District and also a donut shop. Witnesses say that the agents wore camouflage and bulletproof vests and kept their faces covered. According to a statement from Homeland Security Investigations, approximately 45 people were arrested in the raids. They released the names of a handful of that group that they said had violent and criminal records, but we don't know much about 35 or so of the people that they picked up. Protesters showed up at the sites of the raids, saying they are targeting people with no criminal records in the United States who are hardworking and contributing to society. And it created tense scenes through the region. Again, the feds say that these people are here illegally, either never having documentation, overstaying their visas, or defying existing deportation orders, whether they are employed or not. Motion, it is those ICE raids that have sparked a lot of these protests that in some cases have turned violent.
Yeah, the protests, many of them specifically in areas where the raids took place. So we're talking about the town of Compton, the town of Paramount, as well as in downtown LA specifically, where there is a major federal immigration-related facility. So pretty spread out, if you know LA, across LA County. It's 4,000 square miles there. And so, to the average Angelino this weekend, they said, I went to the farmer's market. I'm enjoying myself. For most of us, we didn't really experience any sort of major chaos. It definitely does not feel like 2020 in terms of BLM by any stretch of the imagination, though you did have the president on Sunday saying, there was rioting happening and I had to call in the National Guard here. So there were these violent confrontations that took place in a number of places across the city. And the feeling from the administration is that locals and state officials were not doing enough. But the reaction here definitely caught local and state officials by surprise.
So Trump issued an order to override Californian officials and send in the National Guard on Saturday as law enforcement officers faced off with hundreds of protesters for a second consecutive day, in some cases using rubber bullets and flashbang grenades. In a post on X, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said that active duty Marines have also been put on high alert at Camp Pendleton, that's about 100 miles south of Los Angeles, and that they could be mobilized if things escalate further. Typically, governors activate the National Guard for public safety emergencies like protests, not the president. In a post on X, California Governor Gavin Newsom described Trump's order as, quote, purposely inflammatory, saying that the federal government was mobilizing the National Guard, quote, not because there is a shortage of law enforcement, but because they want a spectacle. And then there's Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass. She called the move, quote, posturing, saying it's completely disruptive to a city that's already gone through so much in the first 6 months of the year. She was referencing the wildfires that ravaged Los Angeles back in January. So this is how Bass described several raids targeting undocumented migrants in a handful of locations around Los Angeles Friday. She was talking to a local news outlet.
Outrage that this has happened. Of course, what happened here, I think, was probably the worst. There were a number of locations where ICE raided today. And, to me, when these things happen, it sows a sense of terror in the community. It's bad enough that it happened at this location, but the way this goes and spreads throughout the community, then people are not sure where they're safe.
Federal officials called her comments inflammatory and provocative. Notably, following the violence on Saturday, Bass put out a much more subdued statement about the need for peaceful protests.
Yeah, what's notable on Friday is you had Bass and others referring to the terror being struck by federal officials, calling for people to rise up against federal authorities. That, of course, is then followed by some of these altercations, including people throwing full-on rocks at ICE vehicles, Jill, in some cases destroying ICE vehicles, doing damage to the federal building in downtown LA. And so you saw what unfolded there. And that's what leads Bass and Newsom, after being very aggressive in their statements on Friday, to try to cool things down, at least as of Saturday night.
So the troops deployed to Los Angeles were from the 79th Infantry Brigade Combat Team of the California National Guard that specializes in crowd control. Again, demonstrations in the city of LA, mostly peaceful, but some of the protests that broke out in other areas like Compton and Paramount, those are neighborhoods south of downtown LA. Those were more confrontational. At least 20 people were arrested Saturday, mostly in the largely Latino and working class suburb of Paramount, in addition to the more than 100 people arrested at the protests on Friday.
Jill, and we should note that the violence and altercations continued on Sunday. Several thousand protesters shutting down traffic on the 101 freeway Sunday in LA, which, already there's bad traffic in LA, but they shut things down. There were confrontations there between protesters and the cops. Also, a number of scenes played out on Sunday of protesters throwing rocks at law enforcement vehicles, including taking out a few windshields there. So some dangerous moments there. The LAPD saying 2 of its officers were injured after motorcyclists attempted to breach a skirmish line at an ongoing protest in the Alameda area. They were able to take those 2 motorcyclists into custody after injuring the cops being treated at a local hospital. We also saw imagery on Sunday of several Waymo self-driving cars vandalized and set on fire by protesters. So certainly tensions continue to escalate on Sunday.
Now, despite the violence, in a post on X, FBI Deputy Director Dan Bongino said that the federal government is, quote, not stopping or slowing down, and promised illegal immigration operations will continue. The top federal prosecutor in Los Angeles, Bill Asalee warned protesters that investigators are combing through social media to find perpetrators.
We've got lots of video online and both surveillance videos. We have FBI teams working around the clock. We will identify you, we will find you, and we will come get you.
So this is all part of a very fast-moving situation, Jill, that really got triggered on Friday morning with these first raids, which appear to be part of this new phase we've told you about of the Trump administration immigration crackdown. We know that the president himself has been frustrated by the lack of deportations, the lack of arrests, and increasingly they're going into these blue areas, these blue states, Massachusetts, Minnesota, Chicago, and now in California. One of the things they're doing right now is focusing on workplaces. There's been this dispute within the administration of whether to continue to just focus on criminals, people who are here undocumented status or illegally, who have committed crimes while in America and should be deported, versus just anyone who's here with an undocumented status. Stephen Miller, the Homeland Security advisor, who has a very aggressive stance when it comes to enforcement. He wants all, allegedly 14 to 15 million undocumented migrants kicked out of the country, regardless of whether they're seeking asylum, regardless of whether they committed a crime here. And he actually, in a meeting last month, told ICE authorities, start going to 7-Eleven, start going to Home Depot parking lots, start picking people up left and right. And it's not just enough to, get people who have criminal records here. So they're deliberately choosing these blue areas, especially in California, where you have a very large population of undocumented migrants. And I think they knew they would be potentially provoking a fight here, forcing Democrats, everything is political here, to look like they're defending undocumented migrants. They knew things could get violent here. We certainly saw it unfold last week in San Diego when they did those 2 raids on restaurants in San Diego. I should remind you, in San Diego last weekend, a bunch of residents were confronting ICE authorities during those raids, shouting shame, comparing them to Nazis and fascists. And so now you saw this unfold in LA, a much bigger city, going after places that people typically didn't do. And beyond that, Jill, there are a number of stories of folks who are trying to go through the process of becoming citizens, going through asylum process. And apparently, as they went and had their meetings in recent days in LA, and maybe were not granted asylum, they were then immediately detained and started to be processed for deportation, including their children with them there. So there's these images of kids in zip ties. Several members of Congress tried to visit some of these people saying, why should these people be deported in this matter? They actually tried to go through the process legally. They're working here in America. But as far as the Trump administration is concerned, that doesn't matter to them. They need to grow these numbers, and they're booting people regardless of whether these people have been trying to work. Some of these people are actually paying taxes, et cetera. It was interesting when they put out names on Friday of the 40-something folks they arrested. The authorities from ICE released about 6 or 7 names and said, look at these guys. This one committed sexual assault. This one committed these crimes, which, is true for a number of them, right? But then there's about 35 plus that we don't know the names of. We don't know if they committed any crimes while they're here, though we should note again, they are here and have undocumented status, right? So they either crossed the border without obtaining a visa, they either overstayed a visa, they overstayed asylum, they didn't file the proper paperwork. And I think there's a lot of people in California that see a nuance there, see a distinction, feel like those people should be treated differently than the people who have committed crimes. And ultimately, as far as, again, the administration is concerned, they're all the same. They all shouldn't be in this country right now. Now, this National Guard move is significant because, as you mentioned, typically you need a governor to approve this. So you have to go back to the 1960s and Lyndon Johnson for the last time that you saw the feds override a state. That was LBJ sending troops into Alabama to protect civil rights demonstrators because the state at that time wouldn't do that. So we have seen in the past, though, National Guard deployed to California. That has to do, you go back to the riots in the 90s, you go back to Black Lives Matter and the riots that then unfolded out of that in June of 2020. But that was always done in coordination with local officials, with the governor saying, we need the support right now. This on Saturday night, Trump said, I'm going to do this on my own, even though Gavin Newsom was like, yeah, I think we can manage this on our own. Notably, late on Sunday, Newsom said that he will be filing a lawsuit against the Trump administration early this morning over its deployment of the National Guard, saying he did it despite not getting the state's consent, a move that has very little precedent here in American history. Newsom saying that Trump's executive order specifically notes, this is in the executive order, that under what the Pentagon did, it had to coordinate with the governor of the state. Well, He says they never coordinated with the governor of the state because that's him. So Newsom calling out the executive order, saying that it is unconstitutional here. So we're going to watch this play out in court as well as on the streets of California. In an interview late Sunday, Newsom talked about that on MSNBC. He also was asked about the border czar, Tom Homan, who said that he wouldn't rule out arresting Gavin Newsom, the governor, or the mayor of LA, Karen Bass, if they interfered with the attempts here to continue to take in undocumented migrants. To that, Newsom said, come after me, arrest me. Let's just go over it, tough guy. You know, I don't give a damn. I care about my community. So certainly Newsom challenging the administration here. We did see late on Sunday, too, that Trump replied that he wants the mayor of LA and the governor to apologize to the people of California over what is unfolding here. And part of this is also a lesson for Trump from 2020. When he wanted to do this in 2020, but he got pushed back from within his own administration and then effectively had to defer to the states. So this time around, he's getting aggressive. And I think he likes the images of, the military coming in there and Trump establishing order in these places and creating this political situation again, where he can show to the rest of the country, look at these people in California defending undocumented migrants. And again, as I explained, there's nuance here, right? Some are criminals, some are going through the process. One of the things that we're wondering about here is how long will this stay? Will things escalate over the coming days? Right now, the understanding is that the National Guard will be there for the next 60 days. But as we were covering this over the weekend, Jill, on Premium, people were asking, like, what do you think happens next? And there is a chance here, depending on how things escalate across American cities, that we could see a version of, I don't want to say exactly, but June 2020, when what began as protests could be taken over from some more violent elements. And you saw that in some of these protests. If you look at some of the images and video coming out of what was happening in the federal building, some of these people who are engaged in throwing, Molotov cocktails and various things at the ICE authorities, at the federal law enforcement, there are these sort of like Antifa, left-wing anarchist elements that sort of show up at these things. And so what began as a community sort of trying to push back against ICE became increasingly violent, and now we see more of these violent elements. So let's keep our fingers crossed that this doesn't escalate across the country, but that's certainly something we're going to watch here in the coming days across a number of American cities.
Some of the most active protests against immigration raids in the area were taking place near a Home Depot in Paramount after reports that federal agents were about to conduct a sweep at the Home Depot and arrest people who could not prove that they were in the country legally. Federal prosecutor Bill Iseli said that the agents were setting up with a nearby ICE office to execute arrest warrants for people who had been previously deported. When a rumor started that agents were about to sweep the Home Depot, 82% of Paramount's more than 51,000 residents are Hispanic. About 36% are foreign-born, according to the census data. Communities like Paramount around LA have for decades attracted Latino immigrants who clean hotel rooms in tourist districts, manufacture clothes, or work at the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach. Local officials say the mood in the city has been tense since President Trump took office for the second time earlier this year, promising to deport thousands of undocumented immigrants.
Yeah, he's trying to supercharge things. As I mentioned, ICE data shows that deportations and arrests are up over the last month and a half or so, as he's really tried to light a fire under ICE here. Now, as far as raids and deportations so far, a lot of it's happening still in red states, Florida, Texas, Georgia. You could say where you have a number of local and state officials and law enforcement that are cooperating with these deals with the feds here. But, a big frustration the feds have had is that a number of the blue states, Democratic-led states, are not cooperating. The LAPD put out a statement over the weekend saying it's not our job to determine immigration status and help with federal immigration enforcement. That's a Fed job. We don't cooperate with that. So they've been pushing back, the feds have, on these states. And so, again, I don't think it's a mistake here that they're making this move. It does come politically at a time where the president's numbers on the economy are down due to tariffs. And immigration has always been a very strong issue for him, even among independents, even among some centrist Democrats, who agree with the general notion that people here illegally, especially criminals, should be deported from this country. So these images now unfolding here. We're going to watch this back and forth. Trump harbors no love for California, no love for Gavin Newsom. He doesn't even refer to him by his name. Trump, in all of his social posts, refers to him as Gavin Newscum. That's his nickname for him. And so here, he's taking a very aggressive approach. Not lost on him, too, is that Newsom has these ambitions to run for president in 2028. And you have these images of people destroying property, throwing rocks at cops. You had a car on fire in an intersection, Jill, with a guy on a motorcycle waving a Mexican flag over the weekend that's just been on loop on conservative media on Sunday. And you saw J.D. Vance and others take notice of that, saying, this is not an invasion. I don't know what is. Remember, the arguments they've been trying to make in court for more aggressive enforcement have to do with the idea of an invasion. So literally a bunch of people holding Mexican flags next to a car that they lit on fire in an intersection certainly reinforces their argument because remember, the White House has been losing some of these cases in court about some of the ways they want to interpret the law here. So this immigration fight is going to escalate here. This is something we're going to watch very closely. Again, there's a lot of nuance here. And so depending on what media outlet you watch, you might only get a certain version of the story. We'll try to remain here telling you a comprehensive version of the story. We did hear, Jill, I should mention, from a number of members of the Mo News community who work in hospitality, agriculture, and construction, who say that for a couple of weeks now, every time there's a rumor that ICE might be nearby, nobody shows up to work. And so I heard from someone in the community who's actually trying to lay concrete on some homes right now. They can't find anyone who is willing to show up to work to lay concrete right now because they all have various levels of undocumented status right now. So there are economic ramifications to this, sort of the least well-kept secret in America as to what extent we depend on undocumented labor in certain industries here. And that's why for years, whether it was Bush, Obama, Trump 1, Biden, the focus was always criminals and not everybody who's here with undocumented status. Because remember, millions of them are working, millions of them pay taxes. Another dirty little secret, those Social Security numbers that belong to people who have died sometimes are assigned to undocumented laborers so they can be employed and pay taxes. So, there's a lot of complicating factors here. And so if this escalates and this continues in this manner, you will see industries probably start to phone the White House being like, hey, can we focus on criminals again, even while you try to get your numbers up? Because there are some ramifications to all of this. And this could have an inflationary impact because now there's people showing up. Prices are going to rise if you're eventually trying to hire Americans to do those jobs, of which there are not enough of them. And if you do hire them, they're going to cost much more. So there's a whole trickle here of politics, economy, a lot of factors to think about as you look at what's unfolding in Southern California.
Sticking with immigration, Kilmar Abrego Garcia, who is the migrant mistakenly deported to an El Salvador prison earlier this year during one of the Trump administration's mass deportation flights, he has been brought back to the United States, but it is not to be a free man. He will now be facing criminal charges for allegedly transporting undocumented immigrants within the country. Abrego Garcia was indicted by a Tennessee grand jury in May, accused of shuttling thousands of migrants across the United States after they crossed the southern border and smuggling guns and drugs into Maryland several years ago.
So remember, after they deported him accidentally, they were like, oh, our bad, but we can't get him back. We started to learn details about Abrego Garcia. They started to dig into him. And there was apparently this traffic stop several years ago where cops accused him of being a human trafficker, but they didn't see enough evidence there, so they didn't pursue a case. Well, federal officials now, for obvious reasons, have looked deeper into that case, and they believe they have a case here. They went to a grand jury, and the grand jury, we know how grand juries work, they found enough evidence to indict him. That doesn't mean he's guilty. It just means there's enough evidence to pursue a case against him. So Abrego Garcia, who we were told by the Trump administration, we can't bring back, he's in prison in El Salvador, well, he's back now. And he's going to face these various charges. Now, there is some controversy that one federal official is resigned or been reassigned because they didn't actually believe that this was a necessary case. This felt very political to them, obviously. And so this is where we're at. We have heard the accusations that he's a member of the MS-13 gang, a variety of other things. And so this is going to be really interesting because already you see the White House, saying, look at the Democrats. They made this guy a hero. Well, we're trying to turn him hero into zero here. And it's interesting. They waited around until they had charges here to bring him back from that prison in El Salvador. We're going to watch that case very closely. This is just another example of how political this 3D chess match that Trump is playing against Democrats, trying to portray Democrats as soft on undocumented migrants, soft on crime. Again, this is an issue that he continues to win on while his other numbers have gone down here. And Abrego Garcia, has accusations of domestic violence against him by his girlfriend, now wife, as well as accusations of human trafficking. So the White House already bringing back those images of the senator from Maryland, Chris Van Hollen, sitting down with a drink when he came to visit him in El Salvador, again, kind of pushing that imagery. And Democrats trying to find a way to nuance this, saying, wait, we agree with, deporting folks who are criminals. We just don't agree with how aggressive things are getting. And it's sort of the story here, whether it comes to Trump and campuses and Trump cutting the size of government or cutting the amount government spends, that, there is area to pursue agreement here between the parties. Generally, we all believe that government spends too much, that government is inefficient, that, campuses, to a certain extent are needing some reform when it comes to how they approach political, ideological diversity, anti-Semitism, etc. Criminals should be deported from this country. But then Trump tends to take this more extreme approach, and it tends to provoke a reaction. And that's a reaction that he is comfortable provoking because he believes it helps his side and also helps him gain more executive authority here over time. And so it puts Democrats in a precarious situation, and a situation where they have to explain these things and try to drive nuance when they have a certain side of the party that is very angry here. I certainly heard from a bunch of people over the weekend, Jill, who were like, Moshe, how can you side with whatever? I'm like, I'm not siding with anyone. I'm just showing you what's happening here. But this is an issue that is very, very divisive, very, very emotional. And so it's going to be pretty touch and go here for the next few days as we watch the reaction of what unfolds here in LA.
All right, time for the speed read from Reuters. President Trump's order banning citizens of 12 countries from entering the United States went into effect today and affects travelers from Afghanistan, Myanmar, Chad, the Republic of Congo, Equatorial Guinea, Eritrea, Haiti, Iran, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and Yemen. There are also 7 additional countries, including Cuba and Venezuela, whose nationals will face partial travel restrictions. Trump said these countries were determined to harbor a, quote, large-scale presence of terrorists, fail to cooperate on visa security, have an inability to verify travelers' identities, as well as inadequate record-keeping of criminal histories and high rates of visa overstays in the United States.
That it can't come soon enough, frankly. We want to keep bad people out of our country.
He cited last Sunday's terror attack in Boulder, Colorado, in which an Egyptian national tried to light Jews on fire who were holding a walk for Israeli hostages. Dozens were injured. So he used that as an example of why these new curbs are needed. Egypt, by the way, not part of the travel ban. Reaction from the impacted countries has been swift. Chad has retaliated by suspending all visas to U.S. citizens, with the country's president saying that the country, quote, has its dignity and pride. Venezuela's interior minister warned that, quote, being in the United States is a great risk for anyone, not just for Venezuelans.
Yeah, so if this seems familiar, it's because there was a travel ban instituted back when Trump took office the first time, though in a much more haphazard, immediate way. This time, they tried to research it in a better way. They also have backing them up this time, the Supreme Court from 2018, which upheld in certain parts that travel ban. And now Biden then repealed the ban in 2021. Trump now bringing it back for more countries here. Democrats, human rights organizations condemning it, calling it discriminatory, racist. Republicans supporting this, contending that Americans are worried about immigrants who come to the U.S. and commit crimes and stay beyond their visas. The White House calling these common sense restrictions that will protect Americans from dangerous foreign actors. Though we should note that of the 19 nations that either have a full ban or partial limitations here, only 2 are on the state sponsors of terrorism list. One is Iran, the other one is Cuba. And there are a number of exceptions this time. This was the reason for the confusion last time when they just announced it and then they didn't release the exceptions until after the fact, confusing CBP and border officials. So there's exceptions here, including lawful permanent residents, if you have a green card, if you have immediate family members who hold immigrant visas. Also included here, children from the affected countries who are being adopted and their parents, as well as athletes traveling here for major sporting events. The U.S., remember, is hosting the World Cup next year, also has the Summer Olympics in LA in 2028. So they made a point here of actually going through exceptions as to not create chaos upon entry for everybody.
All right, now to the Elon Musk, President Trump drama that escalated last week. From NBC News, in a phone interview with NBC on Saturday, President Trump said that there would be, quote, serious consequences if Elon Musk funds Democratic candidates to run against Republicans who vote in favor of the GOP's sweeping budget bill. NBC has not released audio of that phone call, but reported that Trump said if Musk were to fund Democrats, that, quote, he'll have to pay very serious consequences. He declined to share what those consequences would be. It is not clear what legally he could do, given that there is a First Amendment right to support and donate to whichever candidate you want. The president also said he has no desire to repair his relationship with Musk after that feud between the two men erupted into public view last week. He said he thinks his relationship with Musk is over.
Never, ever, ever getting back together. We'll see about that, Jill.
There were some low blows. I don't know how you come back from it, but I guess you never know.
You can, listen, the thing is,
come back from anything.
Especially, some people who Trump has had full on wars with who have come back into his good graces here. It depends on how much Elon apologizes to Trump here. Though Elon did post over the weekend that he's not apologizing until the entire Epstein list is released. Now, I've told you guys before, it's not clear what is left or what is the Epstein list at this point. There's so much has already been released. And so everyone keeps saying the Epstein list, the Epstein list. It's not clear that there's anything left on the Epstein list. And by the way, if Donald Trump was on the Epstein list, you think over the 4 years of Joe Biden, that wouldn't have been leaked out by Democrats? Clearly it would have. Are you kidding me? There were 4 indictments against him. Anyway, that's besides the point. We'll see what happens between the two of them. But what popped over the weekend, Jill, not surprisingly, is leaks from the White House about Elon Musk and some of the things that he was up to that were upsetting the president. The Washington Post over the weekend reporting that the split between Trump and Musk is also being driven by Trump's concerns over Musk's drug use. The Wall Street Journal had details on this as well. Musk has acknowledged using ketamine, which is a powerful anesthetic, which has been prescribed to him for treating depression. The New York Times recently reported that Musk was using so much ketamine on the campaign trail that he told people it was affecting his bladder. He traveled with a pill box with medication with the marking Adderall, but was really taking ketamine. Now, Trump famously doesn't drink and is very anti-drug, partially because Trump had a brother who died of alcoholism and abuse. So this is something, he didn't appreciate, apparently had concerns about, especially as more and more media reports were coming out about Musk's drug use and how it was impacting him here. Then there were literal reports, Jill, of physical fights between Elon Musk and, in one case, the Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent. So Bessent and Musk were in a meeting in the Oval Office in April, apparently fighting it out verbally over who should be the next IRS commissioner. There's been 5 of them over the past few months. And Bessent's choice won out. So apparently, as they walked out, they started to exchange insults. Bessent brought up Musk's claims that he would uncover, you're the guy who's going to uncover $1 trillion in wasteful spending. How's that going for you? Musk apparently didn't appreciate that. He then rammed his shoulder into Bessent. Then Bessent hit him back. People had to break it up. This is literally right outside the Oval Office in the White House. Apparently, this got back to Donald Trump, and he's like, this is all too much for me. So apparently, there were escalating issues with Musk now for a few months, which explains why Trump recently wrote on social media last week that Musk was wearing thin in recent months. Shoulder ramming and ketamine abuse, Jill. Welcome to the first few months of the West Wing. It's not Aaron Sorkin's West Wing anymore.
Not even almost, actually. But Moshe, as you always say, Veep is kind of the best representation of what it's really like in the White House, not the idyllic West Wing.
Right. We wish it was West Wing. We think it's Scandal or House of Cards, but it's really just Veep.
Which sounds just about right, actually. This feels like it could be a storyline.
Jill, with Kamala Harris, there were literal episodes, when Doug Emhoff's daughter was trashing Israel a couple years ago. It was literally taken from the script of Veep. A couple of the storylines that happened in recent years.
From NPR, college sports big money era is here. A federal judge on Friday approved a multi-billion-dollar class action settlement, paving the way for colleges to directly pay student athletes for the first time. The payments will be limited by a salary cap set initially at $20.5 million per school, and nearly $3 billion will be paid out to former college athletes who weren't allowed to earn money while they were in school. The NCAA and schools have agreed to pay the billions to former college athletes who played before 2021. That is the year that the NCAA changed its rules to allow players to sign licensing agreements to earn money from their name, image, and likeness rights. Going forward, the settlement puts in place a new system that allows schools to pay players directly. Schools will be able to decide which players to pay and how much to pay them. It is expected that most of the money will go to the sports that generate the most revenue for schools, which means we're talking about mostly football and men's and women's basketball.
Yeah, I think 3/4 of this is estimated will go into the men's football programs. Unclear how Title IX will factor into this, though at least some of the funds will be directed into women's sports here. And while players will be compensated directly for participating in athletics, potentially through some of these contracts could be 7 figures or more, Jill, they will still not be classified as employees. They will be independent contractors. So there's a lot of complicating factors here in this new development. So starting later this year, colleges will be able to opt into revenue sharing with athletes. Athletic departments will be allowed to use their own funds to pay players. The cap expected to be about $20 million per school. This is one of the biggest changes in the history of college sports here. College athletics has always been ruled with the tradition of amateurism. NCAA rules have banned schools from compensating players with anything beyond a scholarship that until now covered tuition and attending college. But the money in big time college sports has grown exponentially. And athletes were like, where's our piece of this? So there were a number of lawsuits in recent years related to paying college athletes. There was a class action lawsuit of 400,000 current and former college athletes that sued the NCAA and the athletic conferences. Negotiations took more than a year here to complete. And so now money in college sports, a real thing. Which will be interesting to see the impact of this. Also, you saw a lot of student athletes leave after a year to go into the draft, to go into professionals, to make some real money. So wonder now that there's some money in college sports, if that's going to make some players stick around potentially longer and help certain schools. And then how, I'm sure they're going to find ways around the $20 million cap. If you're, certain high-level athletic program, scratch your various big donors who want to help the program. So, solves one problem, but probably opens up future problems.
And Moshe, as a huge college sports fan myself, and nothing against college athletes getting paid, I think another question is, is it just going to change the feel of college sports? The camaraderie, the amateurness in a way. I don't know. You've got to wonder what the unintended consequences might be. From NBC News, new breast cancer diagnoses in young women are up in the last decade. From 2012 to 2021, the rate increased 1.4% annually in women under 50, compared with a 0.7% annual increase in women 50 and up. The trend applies to all racial and ethnic groups, particularly Asian American and Pacific Islander women under 50, for whom diagnoses have risen nearly 50% since 2000. Black women have the highest rate of breast cancer before the age of 40 and are also most likely to die from the disease. Young women are more likely to be diagnosed with aggressive breast cancer compared with older women. One possible reason is that they're not getting screened as much, so it's harder to catch those cases early. But why young women are being diagnosed with breast cancer at higher rates is a mystery. Remember, most major medical organizations recommend screenings begin at between 40 and 45 for women with average risk. In parts of the country, like here in New York on Long Island, the recommendation is even earlier. Moshe, here, at least when I was 35, the recommendation was that you get a mammogram at 35. And that's if you're not even high risk, meaning that somebody in your family has breast cancer.
Yeah, Jill, as we were digging into this, it seems like the recommendations are still sort of all over the place. 45, 40, some are still at 50. You just said 35 there. But with these numbers, I think that ultimately, more and more, it looks like screenings need to begin in your 30s.
Doctors generally agree that multiple factors are at play, including lifestyle, hormones, and environmental exposures. Diets high in ultra-processed foods or lack of physical activity can lead to obesity, which can elevate cancer risk. Women in their 30s and 40s have also increased their alcohol consumption in recent decades, and drinking alcohol is linked to breast cancer. Exposure to environmental toxins like air pollution, forever chemicals, or microplastics could also play a role.
Yeah, one of the researchers here also noted that at the time women who are now in their 40s were babies, baby bottles all had BPA. Every family cooked with Teflon pans, used chemicals around the home that have since found to be toxic in the years since. And that also includes things like sunscreen, etc., a lot that have been pulled from the shelves in recent years here. But more data is needed to definitively draw that link to cancer. But again, there's concern about some of the products that have been very popular in recent decades here. One other factor here, girls in the U.S. are starting to get their periods earlier in life. So that means that there's an increased time that they're exposed to higher levels of estrogen. That hormone, in some cases, can feed cancer cells. Another factor here, many women are also delaying childbirth until their late 30s or 40s, which increases the risk of postpartum breast cancer as well. Several young celebrities have announced breast cancer diagnoses in the past year. Pop singer Jessie J revealed last week on Instagram that she has early stage breast cancer. Former star of The Bachelorette, Katie Thurston, documented her journey with stage 4 breast cancer recently. And Danielle Fishel, you might remember her as Topanga from Boy Meets World, also revealed her diagnosis at age 43 last summer.
And finally, from the New York Post, American tennis phenom, 21-year-old Coco Gauff, triumphed over world number 1, Aryna Sabalenka from Belarus, in a dramatic 3-set final to win the French Open. She dropped the first set, but then dominated the next 2, breaking Sabalenka's serve 9 times and turning what had been a setback in the first set to a commanding victory. Gauff is the first American woman to win the French Open since Serena Williams in 2015, and she's also the youngest since Williams claimed that title back in 2002.
So it was an incredible victory. Jill, were you watching?
I did not watch the women's. I watched the men's, though, which we'll talk about after.
So fans are really loving the way Gauff celebrated her win. She ran up into the stands to hug her parents while the whole stadium cheered. The Roland Garros Instagram account posted a video taken by a fan who was seated near her parents, which captured her dad jumping up and down as he hugged her in the stands. She dedicated the win to her parents and thanked them for keeping her grounded.
I would like to thank my parents. You guys do a lot for me, from washing my clothes to keeping me grounded and giving me the belief that I can do it. You guys probably believe in me more than I do myself, so I really appreciate and love you guys.
So, Jill, the answer to the tease from the beginning, we now know her parents are still doing her laundry.
Good for her, by the way.
Listen, I remember, I mean, she's 21 years old? I remember, I think, thanks, Mom, also. I brought my dirty laundry home from college at 21 years old sometimes, so.
Also want to quickly mention the men's match. It was 5.5 hours, incredible, but Carlos Alcaraz won the French Open for the second straight year, beating Jannik Sinner in this grueling, thrilling match. After a stunning comeback, Alcaraz was actually down the first 2 sets, and then he came back, obviously, to win the 3rd, 4th, and 5th sets, and he won the 4th and 5th in tie breaks. So this match sure to become an instant classic.
Jill, we talked last year with the departure of people like Federer and Nadal. You know, there's a new generation of tennis stars. And so at age 22 here, Alcaraz becomes the 3rd youngest man to win 5 major titles. So he trails only Bjorn Borg and the aforementioned Rafael Nadal.
It's funny because I was watching the match at a pool where they just had a big TV, and they flashed to Alcaraz's parents, who looked like super young, and everybody just looked around and they're like, how old is he? How old are we? What is happening?
Right. I guess, Jill, technically, for both Coco Gauff and Alcaraz, you and I could technically
We're the parents' age, exactly.
Yeah,
and I was thinking it, and then someone said it out loud. They're like, how old is he? Or how old are his parents? What is happening?
It's the same feeling I think a lot of us have when, like, you know, they show the, you know, various starting lineups in any sport, and they show the ages and then the birth year of all those guys, and they're like, born in 2000, born in 2002, born in 2001, born in 1999. You're like, what was I doing in 2002?
Oh my God.
All right. Speaking of years, we end, of course, with On This Day in History. On this day in 1856, a band of nearly 500 members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the Mormons, left Iowa City, Iowa, and began the more than 1,000-mile trek to Salt Lake City. They carried all their goods in a number of hand carts. Each family had one cart, the father, the mother, the kids, making their way 1,000 miles across the plains there to their new home in Utah. On this day in 1891, Cole Porter was born. Cole Porter, very important. He helped shape what we consider the classic American songbook, the smooth, clever, timeless music that we know for Broadway, and the music that really, you know, came out in the 1920s, 30s, 40s, 50s. And while many songwriting teams had one person do the music, one person do the lyrics, like Rodgers and Hammerstein, for instance. Cole Porter, famous because he did both of them. Turning 91 years old today. Happy birthday to Donald Duck, making his debut today in the cartoon The Wise Little Hen. On this day in 2004, Clear Channel agreeing to pay one of the largest FCC fines of all time for breaching the Taste and Decency Code, so several $1 million, because Howard Stern and his various sexually explicit segments and lyrics on his radio chat show. But it wouldn't hurt Howard. Since then, Jill, he would go on to get the deal with SiriusXM, renew it a couple times. The estimates here is that over the last 20 years, Howard Stern has brought in about $1.5 billion in salary and various parts of his deal there. He's currently estimated to be making $100 million a year. So I think
things are okay.
Things worked out for him.
He's come a long way from WNBC.
WNBC. You gotta see the movie about him from yesteryear, back from the 90s. All right, and a bit of music history on this day. You Can't Touch This came out on this day in 1990, turning 35 years old today. MC Hammer breaking Billboard records with his album Please Hammer, Don't Hurt Them, which included You Can't Touch This. It remained number one for 21 weeks, so about a third of the year there back in 1990. Now, MC Hammer, big star, had Hammer Pants, the whole deal in the early 90s. And then he had some trouble, filed for bankruptcy. He would then become an ordained minister, become active in ministry and gospel rap, though he did make a comeback in a Super Bowl commercial a few years ago, reviving You Can't Touch This. And so Hammer, on this day in history.
For some reason, I don't think I knew kind of the aftermath of his career, or maybe I just blocked it out. I don't know.
You moved on to other. Jill, you were, what do you say about your 90s? It was a peak Jill Wagner?
I peaked in my 90s.
You were too busy peaking while he was coming down from his peak.
I was starting mine.
Yeah. You were watching Seinfeld, Beverly Hills 90210, And the thing about it is, I feel like in the pre-internet, pre-social media era, we sort of like would see these big hits and then like sort of lose touch with these celebs. And unless you watch like Entertainment Tonight,
right, or
like read People magazine, like in print form, like you sort of like weren't tracking these celebs after they peaked. Now with social media, like we, can track some of them in their continued success, or some of them like they're having their various troubles, like Britney Spears, for instance, right now on social media. It's, it's a tough watch.
Right. We're literally watching celebs in real time going through some real stuff. Yeah.
I mean, the Amanda Bynes stuff, I don't want to put too much of a damper at the end of this podcast, but that's one of the things we now have. We can track everybody these days.
All right. This is our last podcast together for a while. So let's pick it up. It was I hope
it's a good podcast.
Yes. I hope everyone has a wonderful week. A good way to start it. Thank you all for listening to the Mo News podcast. If you like what you hear, please share this with your friends. It does help us grow. Follow us, subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Those reviews really matter. So if you could give us a kind review, we would very much appreciate it.
Yes, I will drive solo tomorrow. Jill will drive solo the rest of the week and next week. So be kind, rewind, and
love a blockbuster reference.
Love a blockbuster video reference. And thanks to all of you who have sent tips for Japan. And if you need another reason to become a premium member, well, one reason is on various trips, I like to share inside details of where I'm going and interesting things I'm learning about the countries I go to over on the premium Instagram page. So go join over there, and I'll take you along for the ride for as many meals as I can have. Sushi, whiskey, sake. Food is going to be heavily.
So are you doing anything besides eating?
Food? I'm told we're going to a fish market. I need to really dive into
also related to food.
That's true.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Thanks for listening to the Mo News podcast. Have a fantastic day. I hope you enjoyed.